In a quiet penthouse kitchen, a powerful man sees a sleeve slip, and a secret no one was meant to notice. He doesn't call out the pain, he sets a plan. A safe ride, a warm clinic, a silent code word if danger comes back. But when he tries to fix the system, the internet explodes. His simple message goes viral, and suddenly kindness is a headline. That's when the shadow fights back. A smear, a threat, doors unlocking in the night. Now the helper becomes the target, and the one person he's trying to protect disappears, leaving only a scarf and a note. Keep the light on. To make it right, he does the one thing no one expects, something that turns private mercy into public shock. But when the country chooses a side, will courage be enough to beat the fear that hunts them? What would you risk to protect a stranger? And how far would you go when the whole nation is watching? The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Evan Kincaid's penthouse kitchen, casting long shadows across the gleaming countertops. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as the expensive machine hummed quietly in the corner, occasionally punctuating the silence with a soft drip. Outside, Boston's skyline stretched toward the horizon, a maze of glass and steel catching the early light, the buildings glowing amber and gold in the dawn's gentle embrace. Evan sat at the kitchen island, reviewing emails on his tablet, his fingers tapping methodically against the screen as he sorted through the overnight correspondence from his executive team. His coffee sat cooling beside him, barely touched. When movement caught his eye, he glanced up discreetly. Marisol Vega, his new housekeeper, was carefully dusting the frames on the nearby wall, her movements quiet and unobtrusive. She worked methodically, her movements precise and efficient, as if trying to leave no evidence of her presence beyond cleanliness. As she reached up to clean a particular photo, one of his mother from years ago, her smile frozen in time at the old diner where she'd worked, her sleeve slipped down slightly. Evan's chest tightened at the sight of ugly purple-yellow marks marring her skin, bruises that spoke volumes in their silent testimony. He kept his expression neutral, though his heart rate quickened, an old familiar anger stirring beneath his calm exterior. "Marisol," he said softly, not wanting to startle her, keeping his voice level and gentle. "Would you like to take some time off? With pay, of course. I could arrange for a company driver if you need to run errands or appointments." He was careful not to stare at her arm, giving her the dignity of privacy. Marisol's hand jerked slightly, and she quickly tugged her sleeve back into place, her fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. No, thank you, Mr. Kincaid. I'm fine." Her voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on the photograph she was cleaning, avoiding his gaze with practiced precision. A flush of embarrassment colored her cheeks. The morning light caught his mother's smile in the photo. Warm, kind, hiding her own struggles as a single mom working double shifts at the diner. The photo had been taken during one of the rare good days when she'd actually had time to sit down with him for breakfast instead of just serving others. Evan remembered finding similar bruises on her arms when he was young, before they'd finally escaped his father. He remembered the excuses she'd made, the long sleeves in summer heat. "Really, it's no trouble," he insisted, keeping his tone casual while reaching for his phone, trying not to make the moment heavier than it already was. "The company has an excellent wellness program, completely confidential." He didn't push further, knowing from experience how counterproductive pressure could be. "Please," Marisol said, her shoulders tense beneath the crisp uniform. "I don't want any attention." She moved to the next frame, her movements even more controlled now, each motion deliberate, as if to prove she needed no assistance. Her jaw was set with quiet determination. Evan nodded, understanding all too well the complex dance of pride and fear. He typed a quick message to Ruth Callahan. "Need your help. New housekeeper might need a safe set of eyes. Discretion essential. His thumb hovered over the send button for just a moment before pressing it, making the decision that had changed so many lives before. Ruth had been his mother's best friend, the one who'd helped them start over when they had nothing but a suitcase and desperate hope. Now retired from her army nursing career, she still had a way of making people feel safe enough to accept help without feeling diminished by it. She knew how to offer strength instead of pity. While waiting for her response, Evan watched Marisol from the corner of his eye as he pretended to return to his emails. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, not a strand out of place. Her uniform was pristine, everything carefully arranged to project capability and control. He recognized the signs of someone trying to make themselves invisible while staying perfectly professional. He'd seen it in his mother, in himself for years afterward. His phone buzzed with Ruth's reply. Church clinic at 6 p.m. Send her if she's willing. I'll be there. No paperwork needed. Brief and to the point, Ruth's hallmark efficiency. Evan cleared his throat softly. Marisol? She turned, her expression guarded, hands clasped tightly before her. I have a family friend, a nurse, who runs a free wellness clinic. If you're interested, she's available this evening at 6. No questions asked, completely confidential. No records. He kept his voice even, offering the information like any casual suggestion rather than a lifeline. Marisol's fingers twisted in her cleaning cloth, wringing the fabric unconsciously. She glanced at the photo of Evan's mother again, then back at him, as if searching for something in his face. For a long moment, she said nothing, her internal struggle visible in the slight tremor of her hands and the way she bit the inside of her cheek. Finally, she whispered, "Only if no one else knows," her voice carrying equal measures of fear and quiet resolve. Her eyes met his directly for the first time that morning. "You have my word," Evan promised, his voice gentle but firm. "Complete privacy." He didn't smile, didn't try to reassure her with empty platitudes. Instead, he offered what his mother had needed most: dignity and a path forward, with no strings attached. The church parking lot was empty except for a modest sedan and the sleek company car that had brought Marisol. She hugged her purse close as she approached the side entrance, where warm light spilled from frosted windows. The early evening air held an autumn chill that made her pull her cardigan tighter, the wool scratching against her neck as a reminder of comfort against vulnerability. Dry leaves skittered across the asphalt, their soft rustling sounds accompanying her hesitant footsteps. Inside, the clinic occupied a converted fellowship hall. The space was modest but welcoming, with soft lighting that cast gentle shadows on the pale yellow walls. Several chairs were arranged in small conversational groupings, and a row of filing cabinets stood discreetly against one wall. Ruth Callahan stood near a small table where a ceramic teapot steamed beside 2 cups, the fragrant vapor curling upward in the still air. A handmade quilt in soft blues and creams was draped over a comfortable chair, its intricate stitching telling stories of patience and care. "Welcome, dear," Ruth said, her silver hair neat above a kind face weathered by years of service. Deep laugh lines framed her eyes, which sparkled with warmth despite the seriousness of the occasion. "I'm Ruth. Would you like some tea? It always helps settle the nerves on evenings like this." Marisol nodded, her throat tight with unspoken fears. She perched on the edge of the quilted chair, while Ruth poured fragrant chamomile into both cups. The liquid glowed amber in the lamplight, promising comfort. "This is my favorite quilt for evening visits," Ruth commented, settling into the chair opposite. Her movements were unhurried, deliberately casual to ease the tension. "Made it myself during my last deployment overseas. There's something about holding something handmade that helps steady the nerves. Each stitch a reminder that care takes time, The quilt was indeed comforting, its weight somehow grounding against the chaos of Marisol's thoughts. She wrapped her fingers around the warm teacup, breathing in the familiar herbal scent that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen on rainy afternoons. "We can take this at your pace," Ruth said, her voice carrying the calm assurance of someone who had sat with countless worried souls. Her hands rested peacefully in her lap, patient and steady. "Nothing happens here that you don't choose. This space is yours tonight." Over the next hour, Ruth's gentle questions and steady presence created a safe harbor where Marisol found herself able to breathe more easily. The wellness check was thorough but respectful, each step explained beforehand with careful attention to consent. When Ruth documented the bruises with clinical precision, her touch was light and professional, her eyes reflecting sadness without pity, a distinction Marisol deeply appreciated. "You are worth protecting," Ruth said firmly, meeting Marisol's eyes with unwavering certainty. "Every single part of you, your body, your dignity, your future, all of it matters." Marisol's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her sleeve, pulling the fabric down to cover the marks that told stories she'd rather forget. "My brother Luis, he's 15. I can't do anything that puts him at risk. He's all I have left. Our parents—" Her voice trailed off, unable to complete the painful history. "Of course." Ruth nodded, understanding without requiring the full story. "Family first. That's why we'll be smart about this." She reached into her desk and pulled out a small card with a QR code printed beside a simple flower design, nothing that would raise suspicions if found. "This connects to a Safe Ride program, available 24/7, completely confidential. The drivers are all vetted volunteers, many of them veterans like myself. No questions asked, just safe transport when you need it." Marisol studied the card, turning it over in her hands as if weighing both the opportunity and the risk it represented. "And Mr. Kincaid? He won't—" She couldn't finish, the fear of powerful men making decisions about her life too raw to articulate. "Evan knows better than to interfere," Ruth assured her, her tone brooking no argument. "That boy learned humility the hard way. He just wants to help create options, not control them. The resources without the strings. Speaking of which..." She pulled out some paperwork from a drawer, the pages crisp and official looking. "If you're willing, we can set up a private account that only you can access. No electronic trail, no outside visibility. Emergency funds that belong only to you." Marisol's eyes widened, hope and suspicion battling across her face. "How? Nothing's ever really private these days. Let's just say Evan knows his way around secure systems." Ruth smiled, a hint of mischief in her expression. "He texted earlier to arrange it. The choice is entirely yours. No pressure, no timeline." After a moment's hesitation, Marisol nodded, decision crystallizing in her eyes. "Yes, but only if Evan keeps your confidence." Ruth finished, recognizing the unspoken fear. "He will. I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, watched him grow from a skinny kid with too many questions into the man he is today. His word is solid gold. Some things don't need explaining to him twice." They spent the next half-hour completing the necessary forms, the scratching of pens on paper, a reassuring sound of progress. Ruth's steady hands guided Marisol through each step, explaining everything in clear terms, making sure nothing was signed without full understanding. By 9:15, Marisol was back in the company car, watching streetlights blur past the window like stars streaking through the darkness. The driver maintained professional silence, focused on the road ahead. The leather seats cradled her tired body while her mind raced with new possibilities. In her purse, the QR card felt like a lifeline, small but strong enough to pull her toward safety when needed. Her small apartment was dark when she unlocked the door at 9:30, the familiar scent of home, laundry detergent, the cinnamon air freshener, and the lingering aroma of that morning's coffee wrapping around her. Luis's bedroom door was closed, soft music leaking through. He was probably doing homework with his headphones on, lost in the digital world that offered him escape. Marisol moved quietly to her own room, not wanting to disturb him, each creaking floorboard a familiar note in the symphony of their modest home. Sitting on her narrow bed, she reached under the mattress and pulled out her grandmother's blue scarf, hidden there like treasure. The delicate fabric still held traces of her abuela's rose water scent, fading but present like a ghost of protection. Marisol pressed it to her face, remembering strong hands kneading bread dough, stories told in musical Spanish, fierce love wrapped in simple wisdom. The memories flooded back, her grandmother teaching her to be both gentle and strong, to bend without breaking. Dios te guarde, she whispered, tucking the scarf beneath her pillow as both prayer and talisman. Her phone lay heavy in her hand as she said her nightly prayers, asking for protection, for wisdom, for her brother's safety. The words, repeated since childhood, formed a ritual of hope against the uncertainty that surrounded them. The familiar words brought some peace to her troubled heart, and she was almost asleep when an electronic chirp made her jump, adrenaline instantly flooding her system. The smart lock on her apartment door beeped again with an unfamiliar tone, not the standard sound of Luis coming home or using his key. Marisol clutched her phone tighter, suddenly wide awake, her heart pounding against her ribs as she listened for footsteps in the darkness. By morning, the beeping from the door hadn't stopped. Marisol stared at her bowl of oatmeal, the steel-cut oats growing cold as she watched Luis push his breakfast around with his spoon. The morning sunlight filtered weakly through the thin curtains, casting long shadows across their small kitchen table. Neither had slept well, the constant electronic chirping a reminder that something wasn't right in their already precarious world. "It's not just our door," Luis finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. His usual playful spark was dim, his shoulders hunched forward as if carrying an invisible weight. "Nino, Mr. Guerra, he makes me fix them all." Marisol's hand froze halfway to her mouth, the spoon of oatmeal suspended in mid-air. "Fix what, hermano?" Luis glanced nervously at the door, then stood up and walked to the air-conditioning vent. With practiced movements that spoke of frequent repetition, he removed the cover and reached inside, pulling out a battered flip phone wrapped in electrical tape. His fingers trembled slightly as he placed it on the table between them. The smart locks, the security cameras. His hands shook as he set the phone on the table, his eyes downcast. "He says I'm good with electronics, that I can make them work how he wants, that I have a gift." His voice caught on the last word. "If I don't?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing with effort. "He says he knows people at ICE, says they'd be very interested in you, that it would only take one phone call." Marisol felt ice in her veins, a cold dread that spread from her chest outward. The threat wasn't new. They'd lived with similar fears for years, but this was direct. Targeted. "How long?" 3 months. It started with just one lock. Then he said he needed more. Then the cameras. Luis unlocked the burner phone, showing her strings of text messages, his thin fingers navigating the outdated technology with expertise beyond his years. "These are the apartment numbers, when to open them. Sometimes in the middle of the night. I didn't want to, Mari, but he said we'd be out on the street. That you'd—" Marisol pulled her brother close, feeling him trembling against her. She could smell the cheap shampoo in his hair, feel the rapid beat of his heart. "This isn't your fault." she whispered fiercely, her protective instincts flaring. She took several photos of the texts with her own phone, making sure to capture timestamps and numbers, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "You were protecting us, but now we're going to protect each other, okay?" Louise nodded against her shoulder, a single tear dampening her shirt. "There's a staffing agency too. I've heard him on calls. They send people to the apartments after I—" He couldn't finish, the words catching in his throat. "Shh," Marisol soothed, though her heart was racing beneath her calm exterior. She stroked his hair gently, the way their mother used to do. "I'm going to talk to someone who can help. Someone I trust." At Evan's penthouse, Marisol moved through her cleaning routine mechanically, her mind churning with worry. The elegant rooms with their gleaming surfaces and tasteful artwork felt distant, unreal, like she was moving through someone else's dream. She dusted shelves without seeing them, her thoughts back in their small apartment with Luis. When the doorbell chimed unexpectedly, she dropped her duster, heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Evan appeared in the hallway, concern evident in his expression. He wore casual clothes today, jeans and a simple button-down, but carried himself with the same quiet dignity he always had. "Just a package delivery," he said quietly, his voice gentle as if sensing her distress. "Marisol, why don't you take the rest of the day? With pay, of course." She started to protest, years of cautious self-reliance making her hesitant to accept help, but the gentle understanding in his eyes made her pause. There was no pity there, just respect. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid. The driver's downstairs whenever you're ready." He didn't press for explanations, didn't make her feel indebted, just offered what she needed most in that moment, space to handle what was happening. The church office looked different in daylight, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the worn carpet. The space felt both sacred and practical, a fitting reflection of Ruth herself. The older woman was already there, sorting through files with efficient movements that spoke of decades in emergency rooms and war zones. "Let's start at the beginning," Ruth said, setting up a small recording device on her desk. The click of the button was oddly reassuring. Her calm presence helped steady Marisol's nerves as she described Luis's situation, showing the photos of the texts, each word bringing both relief and fear. "This is serious evidence of criminal activity," Ruth explained, her face grave though her hands remained steady. "But we need to move carefully to keep you both safe." She pulled out a notepad with a practiced movement. "First, that separate account we set up yesterday. Start moving small amounts of money there. Nothing suspicious, just gradual preparation. $5 here, 10 there." Marisol nodded, taking notes of her own in a small notebook she kept in her purse, the familiar action grounding her. "Second, pack a go bag. Essential documents, medications, a change of clothes. Keep it somewhere easily accessible but hidden." Ruth wrote down a list, her handwriting neat and precise. "And third, we need a signal. If you're ever in immediate danger, text me the words blue light. Day or night, I'll have help there in minutes, no questions asked." They spent the next 2 hours documenting everything, Ruth occasionally making quiet phone calls to legal aid contacts, her voice shifting seamlessly between warm reassurance with Marisol and firm authority with officials. By 11 o'clock, Marisol had a clear safety plan and the first real hope she'd felt in months. The weight on her shoulders hadn't disappeared, but now she didn't carry it alone. "Get some rest," Ruth advised as they finished, her eyes kind but knowing. She squeezed Marisol's hand briefly. "I'll make sure this information gets to the right people." She didn't mention Evan by name, but her expression suggested deeper concerns about the criminal network they'd uncovered, connections that might reach further than they yet understood. After Marisol left, Ruth sat alone in her office, staring at her notes about the staffing agency. The sunlight had shifted, casting longer shadows across her desk. Someone was funding this operation, someone with resources and connections, and she needed to find out who. This wasn't just about one predatory landlord. The pattern suggested something more organized. She reached for her phone to call Evan, determination settling in her bones like an old friend. Just after sunrise on Wednesday, Ruth's call woke Evan. He fumbled for his phone, squinting at the pale light filtering through his bedroom windows. "I found the connection," Ruth said without preamble. Her voice was tight with concern. "And Evan, you're not going to like it." He sat up, instantly alert. "Tell me." The staffing agency, New Horizons Employment Services, received its startup funding through a non-profit called Future Forward. And Future Forward seed money. Ruth paused. It came from the Sarah Kincaid Memorial Fund. Your mother's foundation. Evan's chest constricted. He could picture the small brass plaque in the foundation's lobby, bearing his mother's favorite quote, "Kindness lights the way forward." The grant was issued 6 years ago. Ruth continued, $25,000 for workforce development in underserved communities. Everything looked legitimate then. But 3 years ago, Future Forward changed leadership. They started channeling money into these predatory staffing operations. Evan pressed his fingers against his temples. So the memorial fund I created to honor my mother inadvertently helped build a system that's hurting people like Marisol. You aren't responsible for how others corrupted a good intention, Ruth said firmly. No, but I am responsible for fixing it. Evan got up and walked to his window, looking out over the awakening city. This isn't just about Marisol anymore. How many others are trapped in this pipeline? What are you thinking? Something big. Something that will take this apart systematically and replace it with what it should have been. He checked his watch. I need to call Darius. By midday, Evan sat across from his COO in the glass-walled conference room. Darius Cole studied the proposal on his tablet, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Project Open Hands? Darius raised an eyebrow. Evan, I understand the impulse to help, but this is extreme. Cutting ties with New Horizons will disrupt our entire temporary staffing pipeline, and this kindness PTO concept, paid time off for employees to help others, the shareholders will have questions. They should have questions, Evan replied. We've been unknowingly complicit in a system that enables abuse. That stops now. He stood up and walked to the whiteboard, writing out 4 points. The clean vendor standard is non-negotiable. Evan continued. Any company we work with must prove they're treating people ethically. No more looking the other way. Darius leaned forward. The PR exposure here is massive. If we publicly admit our connection to New Horizons, even a past one through the Memorial Fund, then we'll weather it. Evan cut in. Transparency builds trust. We're not just changing policies, Darius. We're changing the culture that made those policies seem acceptable. Timeline? 48 hours. I want to announce this at Friday's all-hands meeting. Darius exhaled slowly. That's aggressive. Legal will need to review everything. HR has to rebuild the staffing framework. And the board... I'll handle the board, Evan said. You focus on implementation. And Darius, I need your full support on this, not just professionally. The two men locked eyes across the table. Finally, Darius nodded. You'll have it. But we do this carefully with proper safeguards. Agreed. Evan picked up his phone. I need to call Ruth about safe housing options. We may need to move people quickly once this goes public. Back in his office, Evan began drafting the company-wide message. Each word felt weighted with purpose. Dear colleagues, on Friday we will gather for an important announcement about our company's future. The changes we'll discuss reflect our deepest values and our responsibility to our community. This isn't just about policy updates. It's about who we choose to be as an organization and as human beings. I ask you to come with open minds and ready hearts. Together, we can build something extraordinary. Best regards, Evan. He hit send, then immediately called Ruth. I need you to quietly identify safe housing options. He explained. Short-term places where people like Marisol could go if needed. Can you start making those connections? Already on it, Ruth replied. I've got a network of church families willing to help. How soon? Things will start moving Friday. We need to be ready before then. After hanging up, Evan stared at the photo of his mother on his desk. Her kind eyes seemed to ask, "Is this enough?" He didn't know, but it was a start. He opened his calendar and blocked out Friday morning for the all-hands meeting. The simple act felt momentous, like setting in motion something that couldn't be undone. And maybe that was exactly what was needed. That evening, with the city lights flickering on, Evan stood at his kitchen window, watching the shadows lengthen across Boston's skyline. The soft sound of Marisol dusting in the living room drifted through the penthouse. His hands gripped his coffee mug tightly as he gathered his courage. Marisol, he called softly, would you mind joining me for a moment? Only if you're comfortable. She appeared in the doorway, a cleaning cloth still in hand. Yes, Mr. Kincaid. Please, sit. He gestured to the kitchen table, deliberately choosing to sit across from her, rather than next to her. I need to tell you something important, but I want to be clear. You don't owe me any response or action. This is just information you deserve to have. Marisol lowered herself carefully into the chair, her posture tense but attentive. Years ago, I created a memorial fund in my mother's name. Evan began, keeping his voice steady. We gave money to organizations that were supposed to help communities like yours. Today, I learned that one of those organizations, after changing leadership, started funding the staffing agency connected to your landlord. Marisol's fingers twisted in her lap, but she kept her face carefully neutral. I'm so sorry, Evan continued. While I didn't know this was happening, I feel responsible for helping create a system that's hurting people. I want you to know I'm taking concrete steps to fix this, starting with my company cutting all ties with these agencies and creating new standards for how we work with vendors. Why are you telling me this? Marisol asked quietly. Because you deserve honesty. But please understand, Ruth is your support person, not me. I don't want you to feel any obligation toward me or this company. Your safety and independence matter most. A small tremor ran through Marisol's hands. And my brother's safety. Absolutely. Ruth has mentioned you both might need safe rides sometimes. Would you be willing to accept that help? The service is completely confidential. Marisol nodded slowly. Yes, thank you. Ruth also suggested a code phrase, blue light, that you can text her if you're ever in trouble. Day or night. I'll remember, Marisol whispered. One more thing. Evan slid an envelope across the table. This is from Ruth. Some grocery gift cards. Please use them however you need to. Marisol's eyes glistened as she carefully tucked the envelope into her pocket. Mr. Kincaid, thank you for being honest with me. Thank you for listening. You can go home early tonight if you'd like. The car service is already arranged. Later that evening, Luis carried trash to the building's dumpsters, his footsteps echoing in the dim parking lot. The security light above flickered erratically, casting strange shadows. Hey, tech boy. Nino's voice came from behind him, making Luis jump. The landlord stepped out from behind a parked car, his usual smooth manner replaced with something harder. Got a job for you. Luis's heart hammered. I'm kind of busy with schoolwork. Midnight, Unit 12 needs a door check. Nino's smile didn't reach his eyes. Simple job for someone with your skills. My tools are broken, Luis lied, backing away slightly. The circuit tester's fried. I can't. Nino's hand shot out, gripping Luis's shoulder. 24 hours. Fix your tools, do the job, or maybe ICE needs to know about your sister's paperwork situation. He released Luis with a small shove. Don't disappoint me, kid. Luis waited until Nino disappeared around the corner before pulling out his phone with shaking hands. He texted Marisol. He's here. Wants midnight job. In the car, heading home, Marisol read her brother's message and immediately typed, "Blue light," to Ruth. Within minutes, the driver smoothly changed direction, heading toward the church instead of their apartment. Ruth was waiting outside with James, a tall deacon she trusted, when they arrived. "Come inside, both of you," she said calmly. "We'll wait here while the police do a patrol pass of your building." In the church office, Ruth made hot chocolate while James kept watch by the window. Luis huddled close to his sister on the worn couch, looking younger than his 15 years. "Tell me exactly what happened," Ruth prompted gently. After Luis explained, Ruth nodded. "You did the right thing, refusing him. Both of you did the right thing coming here." At 11:45, Ruth's phone buzzed. "The patrol's clear. James and I will walk you up." The small group moved quietly through the night-dark parking lot, Ruth and James flanking the siblings protectively. Inside their apartment, Ruth checked the locks while James examined the smart lock panel. "I'll have someone look at this tomorrow," he promised. "Make sure it hasn't been tampered with." When they were finally alone, Marisol pulled the blue scarf, her grandmother's last gift, from under her pillow. She wrapped it carefully around a small backpack she'd prepared with their important documents and some clothes. Luis watched from the doorway as she tucked the go-bag into her closet. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "About Nino, about all of it." Marisol pulled him into a tight hug. "Listen to me," she whispered back, her voice fierce with love. "We have people now, real people who want to help us. We are not alone anymore." By Thursday morning, the plan had a pulse. Evan sat at his desk, watching the sunrise paint Boston's skyline in shades of pink and gold, the light streaming through his office window and casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floor. His inbox already held 3 urgent updates from different teams, each one a confirmation that wheels were in motion, that people were rallying behind something that mattered. The legal department had worked through the night, fueled by coffee and determination, crafting precise termination notices for the predatory staffing agencies. The documents lay ready in a folder marked Priority 1, each page highlighting breach of ethics clauses and documented violations. Red flags had been meticulously catalogued: exploitative contracts, unreported incidents, suspicious billing patterns, all evidence of a system that profited from vulnerability. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus in procurement. "Replacement services confirmed. Clean records, living wage certified. Ready when you give the word." Evan ran his thumb over the screen, feeling a rush of gratitude for Marcus's efficiency. The new agencies had been vetted thoroughly, their treatment of workers scrutinized, their leadership interviewed personally. Evan picked up his mother's old recipe card, now framed on his desk. The handwriting was faded but clear. "Add extra love to everything." Coffee stains marked one corner, a testament to years of use. He smiled, remembering how she'd worked double shifts at the diner but still made time to help neighbors, driving Mrs. Baxter to doctor's appointments, watching the Rodriguez kids when their father was in the hospital, organizing meal trains for new mothers on their street. Down the hall, HR Director Sarah Chen was putting final touches on the kindness PTO guidelines, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she refined the language. She'd kept it beautifully simple. One form, no questions asked, automatic approval for up to 8 hours monthly. For when your neighbor needs you. the header read in warm, inviting font. Sarah had advocated passionately for this program, drawing on her own experience helping her cousin escape an abusive relationship. In the kitchen, Marisol worked quietly, dusting the shelves with careful precision. Sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting specks of dust in the air as she moved methodically from one cabinet to the next. She paused at another framed recipe card on the counter, this one for cinnamon rolls. The careful notes in the margins spoke of someone who cared about details, about making things just right for others. Little annotations like "extra cinnamon in winter" and "let rise longer on humid days" revealed a baker's wisdom. It reminded her of her abuela's recipes, passed down with love, each instruction carrying generations of care. She ran her fingertip along the edge of the frame, remembering the way her grandmother would let her and Luis take turns stirring the natilla, her patient voice explaining that good things couldn't be rushed. The memory brought both comfort and a sharp pang of longing for the security she once knew. At the First Methodist Church, Ruth spread a colorful handmade quilt across a planning table, using it as a makeshift map for Saturday's Open Hands Fair. The worn fabric, stitched with loving care years ago, now served a new purpose. "The lawyers will set up here," she told Deacon James, pointing to one corner where blue and purple squares formed a pattern. "We'll need good lighting and privacy screens. People need to feel safe when sharing their stories." "Got it." James nodded, making notes in a well-worn notebook, his weathered hands steady as he wrote. "What about the tech team? They'll need extra outlets, right?" "Far corner, where we can run extra power strips without creating tripping hazards. The veterans are bringing their own equipment to check for spyware." Ruth marked another spot with a small paper clip. "Food service along this wall. Hot meals, coffee station, take-home containers. No one leaves hungry and everyone gets something to sustain them later." "Security?" James asked, concern creasing his forehead. "2 off-duty officers at the main entrance, plain clothes. They're people I trust, completely. Plus our regular volunteers at each exit. Nobody gets hassled, but everybody stays safe." Ruth's voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had managed crises before. "We're creating a sanctuary, not a fortress." Back at the office, Evan sat before a camera in the small recording studio. Adjusting his collar one last time, he took a deep breath as the countdown began. The light blinked red, and he began speaking directly to the lens, his eyes steady and sincere. "Hi, everyone. Tomorrow at our all-hands meeting, we'll be announcing some important changes. But right now, I want to talk about something personal, something that matters to all of us, that goes beyond quarterly reports and business strategies. If you notice bruises on someone, a co-worker, a neighbor, anyone, please ask if they're safe. Just that simple question can open a door. It might feel awkward or intrusive, but that moment of discomfort could be the lifeline someone desperately needs. And when that door opens, we'll be ready to help, ready to stand beside them. We're setting up resources, safe rides, legal aid, time off to help others in crisis. Because that's who we are as a company. That's who we need to be as human beings. It's not charity, it's community." He paused, thinking of Marisol's careful movements, the way she flinched at sudden sounds, her brother's forced tech work, his own mother's struggles years ago. The memory of his mother's bruised wrists hidden under long sleeves flashed through his mind. Look out for each other. Ask the question. We'll help. Together, we can create safety where fear once lived. The video ended at just under 2 minutes. Evan scheduled it to release after tomorrow's announcement, his finger hovering over the keyboard for just a moment before pressing confirm. There would be no turning back now. By late afternoon, Ruth's phone was filling with confirmations, each message adding another thread to their safety net. 3 pro bono lawyers with domestic violence experience, 5 tech veterans with security clearances who understood digital stalking, 2 trauma-informed counselors prepared to listen without judgment, 10 food service volunteers promising homemade comfort foods, 4 quilting circle members bringing blankets and toiletry kits, both trusted officers available for security, people who understood discretion. She texted the final count to Evan. 26 helpers confirmed for Saturday. Security plan in place. Hope is rising. Her gnarled fingers, evidence of decades of hard work and care, moved slowly but purposefully over the phone screen. As dusk settled over the city, Evan looked out his office window at the deepening purple sky, streaked with ribbons of fading orange. The city lights were beginning to twinkle, each one representing a home, a life, a story. On his desk, the vendor termination notices waited for tomorrow's signatures, the weight of their importance pressing on him. His mother's recipe card caught the last light of day, reminding him that love shows up in the details, in permission forms that don't ask questions, in security plans that protect dignity, in small acts of courage that change lives. He thought about Marisol and Luis, about all the others still trapped in situations they couldn't escape, about the difference that structure and support could make. The pieces were in place. Tomorrow would change everything. He only hoped it would be enough. Friday dawned clear and cool over Boston. At 7:30 in the morning, Evan adjusted his navy tie in his office bathroom mirror. No suit jacket today. He wanted to be approachable. Through the window, he could see employees streaming into the auditorium, building across the plaza. Darius met him in the hallway, tablet in hand. Last chance to soften this, Evan. We could phase it in slowly. Some things can't wait, Evan said quietly. They walked together toward the auditorium. By 8 o'clock, the room hummed with 900 employees. Some perched on steps, others stood along the walls. Evan took the stage without introduction, his presence drawing immediate silence. "Good morning," he began. "Today we're making 4 immediate changes to protect people in our community." The overhead screens lit up with bullet points as he spoke. "Effective immediately," Evan continued. "We're cutting ties with vendors who enable abuse. We're replacing them with ethical partners who treat workers with dignity." A murmur rippled through the crowd. In the third row, a facilities manager whispered, "About time." The clean vendor standard is non-negotiable. Every company we work with must provide living wages, safe conditions, and clear reporting channels for concerns. Evan's voice remained steady. "We're also launching Kindness PTO. Each of you now has 8 paid hours monthly to help neighbors in crisis. No questions asked, no manager approval needed." Near the back, an HR coordinator wiped her eyes. "Finally, we're funding legal clinics and safe ride programs across the city, because sometimes the difference between trapped and free is just a car ride or a lawyer's advice." The silence held as Evan paused, then softened his voice. "If you see bruises, ask if someone's safe. When they trust you with their answer, we'll help. That's who we are now." The applause started slowly, then built until it filled the room. As Evan left the stage, people stood, some crying, others nodding firmly. By 10 o'clock, the internal video had posted to the company channel. At 10:15, a customer service rep shared it to her personal social media with the caption, "My CEO just showed what leadership looks like." The clip spread like wildfire. By noon, it had 100,000 views. Comments poured in. "My mother needed this 20 years ago. I'm a lawyer, how can I help?" Finally, someone speaking truth. At 2 o'clock, Darius strode into Evan's office. "The video's everywhere. Legal's worried about exposure, and 3 vendors are threatening delays." Evan looked up from his computer. "I accept those risks, Darius. Some costs are worth paying." In the library wing, Marisol carefully dusted the oak shelves, Through the open door, she heard two women talking in the break room. "Did you see how direct he was?" One said. "No corporate speak, just straight truth. My sister could have used help like this last year." The other replied, "Maybe now she will." Marisol's hand steadied on the shelf. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope. As evening fell, Luis arrived at First Methodist Church with his laptop bag. 5 veterans had set up a testing station for wireless equipment. A grey-haired man named Mike showed Luis how to detect unauthorized access attempts. "See this pattern?" Mike pointed to the screen. "That's someone trying to get in through the back door." Luis nodded, absorbing every detail. "Can we block it?" "Already done." Mike smiled. "Want to learn how?" At 9:30, Ruth sat in her small office, checking tomorrow's logistics. Her notepad showed the schedule: 8:00 a.m., staff arrival, 3 clinic nurses, 4 pro bono lawyers, 6 ushers, 2 plainclothes security, food service team. The phone hadn't stopped ringing all day. More volunteers offering help after seeing Evan's video. She'd started a waiting list. At 11:30, Marisol sat on her bed, the blue scarf from her abuela wrapped around her shoulders. She picked up her phone and typed carefully. "Thank you for the rides." Evan's reply came quickly. "You do not owe me. We're simply keeping the light on." She touched the words on the screen, feeling their truth settle into her bones. Outside her window, the city lights glowed steady and strong. Saturday dawned clear and brisk. Ruth stood in First Methodist's entrance hall, straightening a welcome banner that read, "Open Hands Community Fair," in warm blue letters. Inside, quilts draped the wooden pews, each one hand-stitched with messages of hope. "You are worth protecting," glowed in golden thread against soft purple fabric. "Your story matters," curved across a sky-blue square. Church volunteers hung them like gentle prayers. By 9 o'clock, the hall hummed with activity. In the kitchen, elderly women stirred huge pots of homemade soup, while teenagers arranged cookies on paper doily-lined plates. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air. "The cocoa station needs someone gentle," Ruth said to Marisol, who stood uncertainly near the door. "Would you like to help there?" Marisol nodded, tugging at her sleeves. She took her place behind the table, carefully arranging marshmallows in a bowl. Her hands trembled slightly as the first guests arrived. In a corner, Mike, the veteran, had set up a tech station with 3 laptops. Luis sat beside him, a look of deep concentration on his face as they examined a router from the women's shelter. "See that?" Mike pointed to the screen. "Someone tried to install monitoring software, but we can clean that right out." Luis's fingers flew across the keyboard, his eyes bright with purpose. "Like this?" "Perfect." Mike smiled. "You've got a real gift, son." In curtained alcoves along the walls, pro bono lawyers held quiet consultations. A young mother emerged from one, wiping her eyes but standing straighter. The lawyer followed, patting her shoulder and handing her a business card. Around 11, a local news van pulled up outside. Ruth met them at the door. "You can film the main hall," she said firmly, "but no close-ups of guests without permission." The camera captured tender moments. An elderly man serving soup with a grandfatherly smile, veterans patiently explaining tech safety, quilters adding new messages to their work. The reporter spoke softly about community coming together. At the cocoa station, Marisol found her rhythm. She added extra marshmallows for children, noticed when someone needed a refill. Slowly her shoulders relaxed. When a small girl said, "Thank you, pretty lady," Marisol's smile reached her eyes. "Got it?" Luis's voice carried across the room. He'd just fixed the shelter's router, removing all traces of spyware. The room broke into gentle applause. Luis ducked his head, but his grin showed pride. maybe the first time his skills had earned pure praise. By mid-afternoon, the news footage had joined Evan's viral video online. Comments poured in. "This is what community looks like. My church could do this too. Those quilts, where can we learn to make them?" Ruth found Evan near the kitchen, sleeves rolled up as he washed dishes. "We need to talk about next steps," she said, drying her hands. "People keep asking where they can stay tonight." They moved to a quiet corner. Ruth spread out a notepad. "I'm calling it Hope Homes. We have retired bed and breakfasts willing to convert, church members offering guest rooms, but we need structure, training, security." Evan listened carefully. "I'll provide seed funding," he said, "but governance should come from survivors, veterans, faith leaders, not my company. This needs to belong to the community." "Agreed." Ruth sketched a quick outline. "We'll need background checks for hosts, security systems, house managers who understand trauma, and survivors on the board." Evan added, "They know what's needed better than anyone." At 5 o'clock, volunteers set up a sign-up station for Hope Homes, both for those offering space and those needing it. The line stretched to the door. Ruth's phone buzzed. She checked the message and raised her eyebrows. "Senator Martinez's office wants to schedule a call. They saw the video." Evan shook his head. "Tell them to talk to you first. You understand the needs on the ground." Near the quilts, Marisol watched children trace the letters with gentle fingers. One quilt read, "Your light matters," in shining thread. She touched the words, feeling their truth in her bones. Beside her, Luis demonstrated a security app to another teenager. His voice carried confidence now. The afternoon light slanted golden through the stained glass windows, casting warm colors across the busy hall. Hope looked like this. Soup and quilts, gentle hands and firm boundaries, wisdom shared and dignity protected. It looked like community stepping into the light together. Sunday started with relentless ringing. Ruth's phone buzzed every few minutes while she stirred her morning coffee. Evan's office line lit up like a Christmas tree. Even the church's usually quiet number kept chiming. "Good Morning America wants an interview," Ruth told Marisol over speakerphone. "They're offering complete anonymity. Voice changed, silhouette only. No personal details shared." Marisol's breath caught. "I don't know. You don't have to," Ruth said gently. "This is your choice, but if you want to help others find courage, can you be there?" Marisol asked quietly. "Every second," Ruth promised. "We'll practice what to say first." An hour later, they sat in Ruth's living room. Ruth had written key points on index cards. Focus on courage. Set clear boundaries. Thank the volunteers. Never mention specific locations. "Remember," Ruth coached, "your story matters, but your safety matters more. If a question makes you uncomfortable, just say, 'I'd prefer not to discuss that.'" Marisol practiced until the words felt natural. Luis sat nearby, squeezing her hand whenever her voice shook. The TV crew arrived at noon, setting up in a private room at the church. They positioned Marisol behind a translucent screen, adjusting lights to show only her outline. A voice modulator transformed her soft tones into something unrecognizable but still human. "We're live in 3, 2, 1. The producer whispered. The interviewer's voice was warm. "Thank you for sharing your story with us today. What made you finally reach out for help?" Marisol's altered voice carried steady strength. "Someone noticed. They didn't push or demand. They just kept the light on until I was ready to step into it." "And what would you say to others who might be afraid to seek help?" "You are worth protecting," Marisol said, echoing Ruth's words from that first night. "There are people waiting to help, asking nothing in return. You don't have to do this alone." Viewers responded immediately. The show's social media lit up with heart emojis and supportive messages, phone lines jammed with people asking how to volunteer. Off camera, in a nearby office, Evan watched the broadcast on mute. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to his financial advisor. Transfer $5 million to the Hope Homes Launch Fund. Start with Boston, Chicago, and Seattle. Ruth's phone buzzed with a text from the senator's office. We're drafting the Catherine Kincaid Domestic Worker Protection Act. Can we announce during the broadcast? Yes, Ruth replied, but focus on the protections, not the name. 20 minutes later, the senator called into the show live. We're introducing legislation to ensure safe working conditions, fair wages, and protection from retaliation. No one should live in fear while caring for others. The church's donation website crashed from traffic. Tech volunteers scrambled to restore it, adding server capacity on the fly. When it came back online, the numbers kept climbing. 50,000, 100,000, 250,000. By afternoon, Evan's company email system sent an alert. Unprecedented inbox activity. Hundreds of employees were submitting kindness PTO requests. I can drive seniors to medical appointments. My mother taught me to cook. I want to make meals for shelters. I'm a retired teacher. Can I tutor kids at Hope Homes? Luis watched the response flood in on his laptop, eyes wide. Murray, look at this. People really want to help. Marisol touched the screen where messages of support scrolled past. They're not just helping us anymore, they're helping everyone. As evening settled over the city, Marisol and Luis sat at their small kitchen table. She'd made their abuela's chicken soup, the aroma filling their apartment with memories of home. The smart lock stayed quiet. No threatening texts lit up Luis's phone. Do you think it will last? Luis asked, stirring his soup. This feeling of being okay? Marisol reached across the table to squeeze his hand. For the first time, I think it might. We have people now. Real people. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the quiet. Through the window, city lights twinkled like stars. For the first time in years, tomorrow felt like more than just another day to survive. It felt like a door opening to something new, something hopeful. Ruth's last text of the day popped up on Marisol's phone. Rest well, dear heart. We'll be here in the morning. Marisol smiled, tucking the blue scarf around her shoulders as she settled onto the couch with Luis to watch a movie. No need to hide it under her pillow anymore. No need to sleep clutching her phone. Tonight, they could simply be brother and sister, sharing soup and stories, held safe in the web of light that had somehow found them and refused to let go. Monday broke the spell. Marisol was dusting the bookshelves in Evan's study when her phone buzzed with a flood of notifications. Her heart stopped. There, on social media, was a grainy photo from the church clinic. Though partly shadowed, her face was recognizable enough, the tired lines around her eyes unmistakable even in the poor lighting. Someone had leaked it, betrayed her trust when she was most vulnerable. Beneath it, cruel comments multiplied like bacteria in a petri dish. Attention seeker, probably making it all up. Just another scammer trying to get free housing? Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments, each one a tiny knife twisting in her chest. She had to brace herself against the bookshelf to stay upright. It got worse. Someone had posted security, footage of Luis working on door locks, carefully edited to remove context, making him look suspicious instead of helpful. The caption read, "Tech thief caught on camera. Is this your victim?" They'd even circled his face in red like a target. The hashtag #OpenHands, once filled with support and kindness, now crawled with doubts and accusations. Trolls questioned every detail of their story, picking apart their lives like vultures. Some even claimed to know the real Marisol, sharing fabricated stories about her character that made her stomach turn. Darius burst into Evan's office, tablet in hand. his normally composed face tight with concern. His tie was slightly askew, a telltale sign of his agitation. "The stock's down 12% and falling. Board members are calling non-stop. 3 investors have already threatened to pull out. We need to distance ourselves from this. Now." His voice had an edge she hadn't heard before. Evan stood at his window, shoulders tense, but voice steady as the morning sun cast long shadows across his face. "No, we don't abandon people when they need us most. That's not who we are. This isn't about abandonment. It's about protecting the company," Darius insisted, stepping closer. "Thousands of jobs are at stake. We have families depending on us too. And thousands of lives are at stake if we cave to pressure." Evan replied, turning to face Darius. "The truth will stand. We knew this wouldn't be easy." Marisol's phone rang, Ruth's picture lighting up the screen. She stepped into the hallway to answer. "Honey, are you seeing this mess online?" Ruth's warm voice carried concern. "Yes," Marisol whispered, leaning against the cool wall. "It's my fault. I should never have—" "Stop right there." Ruth cut in firmly but gently. "This is not your fault. This is what abusers do when they're losing control. We expected pushback. Remember our talks? This is the storm before the clearing." But Ruth's next words made Marisol's blood run cold. "Nino filed a complaint with the police this morning. He's claiming you stole jewelry from other tenants' units while cleaning. It's completely fabricated, of course, but the officer who took the report is someone he golfs with. We're handling it, but I wanted you to know." Marisol couldn't breathe. The hallway seemed to stretch and contract around her. She'd been so careful, so quiet. And still, the violence found them. Worse, now it was threatening Luis's future and Evan's company, people who had only tried to help. She looked around the beautiful study where she'd felt safe just hours ago. Her cleaning supplies sat neatly arranged in their caddy, the lemony scent of polish hanging in the air like any normal Monday. But nothing was normal anymore. The sunlight streaming through the windows felt like a mockery of the darkness closing in. During her lunch break, she found a quiet corner of the building's garden and wrote a note to Ruth on paper from her small notebook. "Dear Ruth, you showed me what real kindness looks like. I will never forget how you made me feel human again. But I can't let others pay the price for helping me. Luis deserves a future without this shadow. Evan's company shouldn't suffer for doing the right thing. I'm sorry." She folded the blue scarf, her abuela's last gift, with tiny embroidered birds along the edge, carefully around the note. After work, she packed their emergency go-bag. Documents, medications, 2 changes of clothes, the envelope of cash Ruth had helped her save over the past weeks. Every item chosen for necessity, not comfort. Evening brought shouts in the hallway, drunk neighbors arguing about a football game. Marisol's hands shook as she texted blue light to Ruth, their code for trouble. But then police sirens wailed outside, and though they were responding to something unrelated, pure panic gripped her chest like an iron band. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The walls felt like they were closing in, inch by suffocating inch. The small apartment that had finally begun to feel like a home now felt like a trap. "Luis," she whispered, finding him hunched over his laptop. "Get your backpack. We need to go somewhere safe for a few days." "But Ruth said we shouldn't run," he replied, his young face pinched with worry. "She said running makes us look guilty. Please, just trust me. I know what I'm doing." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. They slipped out the back stairs, avoiding the building's cameras. Marisol made one last stop at the church, empty now except for the eternal flame flickering near the altar, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. She placed the blue scarf on a wooden pew, tucking beneath it a final note written on a church program. "Please keep the light on. Protect Luis if I can't. I will find my way back." Her tears fell on the worn wood as she turned away, splashing against centuries of other prayers. She took Luisa's hand, warm and strong despite everything. They would check in from the public library tomorrow. Ruth would understand. She had to understand. The night air was cool on her face as they walked away from the church, street lights casting long shadows before them. Behind them, the eternal flame burned steady, a tiny point of light in the gathering dark, a promise of warmth they were leaving behind, but hoped to find again. At first light, Ruth found the scarf. Her weathered hands trembled as she lifted the soft blue fabric from the church pew, reading Marisol's desperate words beneath. The morning sun streamed through stained glass, casting rainbow shadows across the empty sanctuary. The note, hastily written but carefully worded, made Ruth's heart constrict with both worry and pride for the young woman's determination. She pulled out her phone, dialing Evan first. "They're gone," she said simply. Marisol left a note. There was a long pause on the line. The silence spoke volumes about Evan's concern. "Are they safe?" "I believe so. This isn't a panic run. It's calculated. She's protecting everyone but herself. Typical survivor thinking." Ruth's voice was steady despite her worry. She ran her thumb over the blue fabric, feeling the frayed edges where Marisol had nervously twisted it. "She'll contact us when she feels secure enough. She's too smart to disappear completely." "I'll call Darius," Evan said. "We need to adjust our approach. This changes everything." Within an hour, Evan and Darius sat in the company's crisis room, screens displaying the mounting media circus. Headlines flashed with speculation and accusations. Camera crews camped outside the corporate headquarters. The stock price continued its downward slide, numbers blinking red on the largest monitor. "I've made a decision," Evan announced, his voice firm as he pushed away from the polished conference table. "I'm stepping back as CEO for 90 days. Darius straightened in his chair, his coffee cup clattering against its saucer. "That's exactly what they want, to drive you out. The board will panic, investors will run for the hills. No, it's what we need. The movement has to be bigger than me or the company. You'll handle operations, keep things stable." Evan met Darius's concerned gaze with unwavering certainty. "I'll focus on building Hope Homes and supporting survivors properly, away from corporate interests. This isn't about saving face anymore." "And tonight?" Darius asked, already mentally cataloguing the dozen fires he'd need to contain. "Tonight, I'm doing a live-stream town hall, but not from here." Evan pulled up a photo on his phone. A worn diner in an old mill town, its neon sign flickering against a brick backdrop. "This is where my mother waited tables for 15 years. It's where I learned about dignity and hard work. That's where I'll speak. From the real world, not some sanitized corporate backdrop." While they planned, Ruth methodically worked her network of safe ride drivers, giving them Marisol's description with clear instructions. "If you see her, just note the location. No approach, no pressure. She needs to feel safe, not hunted." She marked points on a worn paper map, creating a grid pattern that respected Marisol's autonomy while keeping watch. Each call ended with Ruth's gentle reminder. "Remember, we're lighthouse keepers, not searchlights." Around noon, Luis appeared at the church office, shoulders hunched and eyes red from crying. His sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as he approached Ruth's desk. "I brought this," he said, pulling the burner phone from his jacket along with a stack of printed texts. His hands shook slightly as he placed them on her desk. "Maybe it can help? I saved everything before we left." Ruth hugged him tight, feeling the tension in his thin frame. "You're very brave, sweetheart." She smoothed his hair back from his forehead, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "Did you sleep at all?" When he shook his head, she guided him to the couch in the corner, covering him with a quilt, before she called a trusted veteran cyber team who specialized in digital forensics. Within hours, they were carefully imaging the device, preserving every byte of evidence while Luis finally slept, exhaustion overtaking his vigilance. As evening approached, Evan sat in a booth at Sally's diner, reviewing his notes for the live stream. The worn vinyl seats and coffee-scented air brought back memories of his mother's tired smile after double shifts. He remembered her counting tips at this very table, making impossible math work somehow. He thought of Marisol's careful movements, of Luis's haunted eyes, seeing the same determined dignity his mother had shown. His draft began. "I owe you all an apology, but not for the reasons you might think. I'm sorry I didn't act sooner. I'm sorry that profits ever came before people's safety. Tonight, I'm not speaking as a CEO. I'm speaking as someone who watched his mother struggle against systems designed to keep her vulnerable." He crossed out a line, rewrote it, searching for honesty over polish. The laptop screen glowed as he refined his words, determined to center the only things that mattered: survivors' voices and everyone's responsibility to act. Outside the window, camera crews began setting up, their equipment stark against the small-town backdrop. Behind him, diner staff prepared for the broadcast, their movements quiet and respectful in this space that held so many stories, like his mother's, like Marisol's. A waitress in her 60s refilled his coffee without asking, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze of support. Ruth sat in a back booth, still coordinating with her network, the blue scarf folded carefully in her lap. A prayer, a promise, a bridge to wherever Marisol and Luis had found refuge for the night. She ran her fingers over the embroidered edge, whispering, "We're here when you're ready, child. Take all the time you need." The clock ticked toward broadcast time. Nearby patrons whispered among themselves, recognizing the famous CEO but giving him space. In his final revisions, Evan stripped away every corporate phrase, every hint of damage control. This wasn't about image, it was about truth, responsibility, and the long road ahead. He thought about what his mother would say if she were here, probably something about rolling up sleeves and doing what's right without expecting applause. Outside the diner windows, the sun set over tired brick mills and hopeful church spires, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Streetlights flickered on one by one, like beacons in the gathering dusk. Inside they waited, ready to speak truth to power, ready to keep the light on for however long it took. The camera operator counted down silently with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. The old diner hummed with familiar sounds, coffee cups clinking against saucers, the soft creak of vinyl seats, and the gentle whir of the ceiling fans. Modern lighting equipment and laptops seemed out of place among the worn Formica tables and chrome-edged counters. Sarah, the diner's owner, moved quietly between tables, refilling mugs with decaf. The regulars had stayed, mixing curiously with the tech crew setting up the live stream equipment. They created an unlikely gathering. Truck drivers beside camera operators, retired mill workers next to social media managers. At precisely 7 o'clock, Evan looked directly into the camera. He sat in booth number 5, where his mother had often rested her feet during breaks. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady. "I'm speaking to you tonight from Sally's Diner in Millbrook, where my mother waited tables for 15 years. She taught me that true character shows in how we treat people when nobody's watching." He placed his hands flat on the table, a gesture of openness. "I owe you an apology. Years ago, my mother's memorial fund gave a micro-grant to what seemed like a worthy cause. That money eventually helped build a pipeline that hurt people, a staffing agency that enabled abuse. While I didn't know then, I know now. And knowing means responsibility." The comment feed began scrolling rapidly on a nearby monitor. Evan continued, his focus unwavering. But this isn't about me or my company. This is about your neighbors who clean your offices, who care for your children, who deserve safety and dignity. Look around your workplace. Notice who seems afraid to take breaks. Ask if they're safe. Offer help. Sarah wiped tears with her apron as she poured more coffee. 2 retired mill workers nodded solemnly. Tonight, I'm announcing that Hope Homes will be governed by a board of domestic workers, veterans, and faith leaders. Ruth Callahan, a retired army nurse who has dedicated her life to helping others, will serve as chair. Ruth moved into frame, settling across from Evan. Her presence brought warmth to the scene, her steady gaze reflecting decades of caring for others. Hope Homes isn't charity, she explained. It's community. It's saying, we see you and you matter. We're building a network of vetted safe spaces, spare rooms, retired B&Bs, church properties, where people can catch their breath and plan their next steps. The comment feed exploded with offers. We have a mother-in-law suite in Portland. Our church has 2 furnished apartments. I can provide job training. Luis approached the table next, his shoulders straight despite his obvious nervousness. Ruth placed a gentle hand on his arm. With Luis's permission and within legal boundaries. Ruth said, we can share that we've uncovered evidence of a coordinated tech coercion ring operating through certain landlords. Luis bravely preserved digital logs that are now helping authorities. A man in a veteran's cap stepped forward. Marcus, the cyber analyst. His voice was calm and professional. We've forensically imaged the evidence and are working with proper channels. The investigation is active and ongoing. The diner had grown completely silent. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause. To those watching who feel trapped, Evan said, we believe you. There are people ready to help. To those who want to help, thank you. We'll need volunteers, donations, and most importantly, your sustained attention. This isn't a one-day story. This is about changing systems. Sarah appeared with a fresh pot of coffee, her hand steady as she poured. My mother worked here too, she said quietly, though the microphones caught it. 32 years. She would have been proud of this. The comment feed continued its relentless scroll. Offers of legal aid, medical care, employment, transportation. Ruth made notes while Luis helped categorize the responses into a spreadsheet. Evan reached for a document that had been sitting at the edge of the table. Tomorrow at noon, he said, I'll take an action that demonstrates our long-term commitment to this work. For now, I'm signing this pledge that Ruth and the board will hold me accountable to. The camera zoomed in as he signed his name, the scratch of his pen audible in the quiet diner. Outside, beyond the window's neon glow, the old mill town settled into evening, its streets holding countless untold stories like Marisol's. The signature complete, Evan looked up one final time. Thank you for watching. Please keep your eyes open, your doors ready, and your hearts brave. Good night from Millbrook. The autumn sun streamed through Sally's diner's windows, warming the cracked vinyl of booth number 5. A notary in a pressed navy suit arranged papers with careful precision, while Evan sat quietly, his hands folded on the worn tabletop. All documents are in order, Mr. Kincaid, the notary said, her voice steady. 50% of your personal real estate holdings, 28 properties total, to be transferred to the Open Hands Trust, effective immediately. Ruth watched from the counter, her weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. The diner's regulars had cleared out to give privacy, though a small crowd had gathered outside, phones raised to capture the moment. The bylaws establish clear governance, Evan said, reaching for the first document. A council of 9, 3 domestic worker survivors, 3 veterans, and 3 faith leaders. Ruth Callahan as permanent chair. 2 survivor seats rotate annually to ensure fresh perspectives. The scratch of his pen seemed loud in the hushed diner. Sarah, still on shift, wiped the same spot on the counter over and over, tears in her eyes. "Power with, not over," Evan said quietly as he signed. "My mother taught me that." Across town, in a command center humming with activity, the veteran cyber team huddled around screens displaying building layouts. Police units moved into position around several properties owned by Arnulfo Nino Guerra. "Execute warrants on Mark," crackled the radio. 3, 2, 1. Luis sat with Marcus, the veteran analyst, watching dots move on a digital map. His preserved logs, screenshots, text messages, GPS data had built the case. Each piece of evidence carefully documented during those frightening midnight maintenance calls. "You did good, kid," Marcus said softly. "Real good." The raids happened simultaneously. News helicopters captured footage of officers leading Nino and several associates away in handcuffs. At a storage unit facility, investigators discovered boxes of duplicated key fobs, modified camera hubs, and laptops filled with tenant data. Back at the diner, Evan signed the final paper. The notary's seal pressed into wax, making it official. Outside, phones flashed as reporters went live. "Breaking news from Boston. Tech billionaire Evan Kincaid has just transferred properties worth an estimated $800 million to a survivor-led trust." On a separate feed, Senator Claire Matthews stood at a podium in Washington. "Today I'm announcing accelerated hearings for the Domestic Worker Protection Act. What we've seen in Boston, both the abuse and the community response, demands immediate action." The afternoon light softened into evening. Ruth's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number routed through a library computer. "I'm safe. Tell Luis I love him. I'll come when the smoke clears." Ruth's fingers moved carefully over the keys, sending back a secure link that would work only once during a specific window tomorrow. "Church office. No cameras, just me." As darkness fell, the city began to glow. First one window, then another, lit up with blue light bulbs, the color of Marisol's hidden scarf, now a symbol of solidarity. From the diner's booth, Evan could see them dotting the skyline like stars. Sarah approached with a fresh pot of coffee. "My mama always said change happens one cup at a time, one kind word at a time." She filled his mug. "But sometimes it takes an earthquake to wake people up." At the command center, Luis watched the evidence being catalogued, each item a piece of the painful puzzle he'd helped solve. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. "Want to learn how to build security systems that protect people instead of trapping them?" The boy nodded, his eyes bright with possibility. The notary packed her briefcase, each document safely sealed. "It's done, Mr. Kincaid. The properties are transferred." Evan remained in the booth where his mother had once rested, watching more blue lights appear across the city. Ruth settled across from him, her presence steady as always. "You know," she said, pouring cream in her coffee, "sometimes the biggest acts of courage are the quiet ones. A boy saving evidence, a sister protecting her brother, a man giving away power." She stirred her coffee slowly. "The hard part comes next. Building something that lasts." Through the diner's windows, the blue lights continued to multiply, each one a promise to keep watch, to care, to remember. In the old mill town and beyond, people were turning on their porch lights, placing blue bulbs in windows, making visible what had too long remained hidden. The news tickers kept scrolling. "Breaking major arrest in housing abuse case. Tech CEO transfers fortune to survivor trust. Domestic Worker Protection Act fast-tracked. Community responds. Hope homes expanding." Sarah turned the diner's sign to closed but left the lights on. Outside, more people gathered, holding phones with blue screens glowing. They stood quietly, bearing witness to a day when power shifted, justice moved, and hope found new homes. Thursday morning smelled like snow. The air held that crisp, metallic scent that New Englanders know means weather is coming, the kind that makes your nostrils tingle and your lungs feel startlingly clean with each breath. Inside the church office, the radiator clicked and hummed, making the small room feel like a cocoon of warmth against the approaching cold front. Sunlight filtered through the frosted windows, casting gentle patterns across the worn carpet and highlighting the steam rising from mugs scattered around the room. Marisol stood in the doorway, her hands twisting the strap of her worn backpack until the edges frayed slightly beneath her nervous fingers. Her shoulders hunched forward slightly, as if she were preparing herself for whatever came next. Luis saw her first. He leaped up from his chair, nearly knocking over his hot chocolate, the ceramic mug wobbling dangerously before settling back onto the wooden table. "Marie!" His voice cracked as he ran to her, his sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floor. She caught him in a tight hug, pressing her face into his hair, breathing in the familiar scent of his drugstore shampoo and that indefinable smell that was just simply Luis. "I'm so sorry, mi amor," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. I thought I was protecting you by leaving. I thought it was the only way." "I know what you thought," he said fiercely, his fingers digging into the fabric of her jacket. "But we're stronger together, always. Don't ever forget that again, okay?" His eyes were bright with unshed tears as he pulled back just enough to look at her face. Ruth watched from her desk, giving them space, her hands folded patiently on the weathered oak surface. Her eyes were kind but watchful, assessing Marisol's state with the practiced gaze of someone who had welcomed many broken people through that door. When they finally pulled apart, she gestured to the comfortable chairs she'd arranged in a small circle. A box of tissues sat ready on the side table, along with fresh tea in a floral pot and an assortment of pastries arranged on a blue ceramic plate. Little touches of normalcy in an anything-but-normal situation. "Let's talk," Ruth said gently, her voice as warm as the room. "No rush, no pressure. We've got all the time in the world today." They settled in, Luis refusing to sit more than an arm's length from his sister, his knee bumping against hers every few seconds as if to reassure himself she was really there. Ruth guided them through what had happened after Marisol left, how Luis brought the evidence forward, his hand shaking but his voice steady, how the veteran cyber team protected and verified the data, working through 2 sleepless nights, how the arrests changed everything, officers arriving at dawn with warrants and handcuffs. "The whole ring is down," Ruth explained, leaning forward slightly. "Nino, his associates, the staffing agency leadership, all of them. The DA has enough evidence for multiple federal charges: housing fraud, coercion, labor trafficking, electronic surveillance violations." She ticked each one off on her fingers, each charge another brick in the wall between the siblings and their former tormentors. Marisol's hands shook as she held her tea, the surface of the liquid rippling with tiny waves. "And the other tenants? The families with children? Mrs. Alvarez with her oxygen tank?" Her voice trembled with concern for everyone but herself. "Safe," Ruth assured her, reaching across to steady Marisol's teacup with a gentle touch. "Emergency housing vouchers were issued yesterday. No one has to go back to those units. The city's housing department has been working around the clock to find placements." Luis reached for his sister's hand, his smaller fingers wrapping around hers. "I kept everything, Mari. Every text, every GPS ping, every work order. The weird times Nino would show up without warning. The inspections that weren't on any schedule." His eyes lit up with a flicker of pride. "Marcus, he's the veteran analyst. He showed me how to document it all properly, how to create verification chains so nobody could say we made it up." Pride and pain mixed in Marisol's eyes, like oil and water refusing to blend. You were so brave, Hermano. Braver than I was. I learned it from you, he said simply, squeezing her hand. Everything good I know, I learned watching you fight for us. Ruth let them have another moment before laying out the next steps. She pulled out a folder and placed it on the coffee table between them. The folder was robin's egg blue with a simple embossed logo, a small house with an open door. Marisol, she said carefully, her tone measured but hopeful. We'd like you to consider something. Not as someone who needs help, but as someone who can lead change. Someone who understands what needs fixing because you've lived through it. She opened the folder to reveal a job description. Interim Director, Hope Homes, Boston Pilot. The paper was crisp and official, with bullet points detailing responsibilities and qualifications. The position comes with comprehensive training, trauma-informed supervision, and clear professional boundaries. Ruth continued, tapping the page gently. You'd help shape how this program grows, ensuring it truly serves people who need it. Your experience, painful as it's been, gives you insight that no amount of academic training can provide. Marisol stared at the paper, her fingers touching the edge as if it might burn her. Her eyes traced the words repeatedly. Why me? There must be people with degrees, with experience. Because you understand both sides, Ruth said with quiet conviction. The need and the solution, the fear and the hope. You've navigated systems designed to confuse and exhaust. You've protected your brother when everything was stacked against you. That's the kind of leadership we need, not just compassion, but first-hand wisdom. A gentle knock interrupted them, the sound almost hesitant. Evan stood in the doorway, deliberately casual in jeans and a navy blue sweater instead of his usual suit. His hair was slightly tousled from the wind outside, making him look more approachable than the polished CEO from the news. May I come in? He asked quietly, his hand still resting on the doorframe, making it clear he would leave if unwelcome. Ruth looked to Marisol, who nodded after a moment's consideration. Evan took a seat slightly apart from their circle, careful not to dominate the space, choosing the simplest chair rather than the comfortable armchair that remained empty. I wanted to say 2 things, he said, his voice pitched low and steady. First, I'm sorry for all the media noise around your name. We're working to shut down any identifying details. Our legal team is sending cease and desist letters to outlets that have tried to run your photos. Marisol nodded, appreciating his directness. Her fingers stopped fidgeting with the paper as she looked him in the eye. Second, he continued, clasping his hands loosely between his knees, you never had to be a symbol. You don't owe anyone your story or your face or your pain. What matters is making real change, the kind that prevents what happened to you from happening to others. Thank you, Marisol said softly, her voice gaining strength with each word. For choosing policy over praise, for building something that might last beyond a news cycle or a fundraising drive. The rest of the day unfolded in practical steps, the mundane but essential work of rebuilding lives. Ruth walked them through NDAs designed to protect privacy, explaining each clause in simple terms. They scheduled initial training sessions for the following week, working around Luis's school hours. A Hope Homes liaison arrived with keys to a temporary apartment, a certified safe space, while the last threads of Nino's influence unraveled in the courts and community. As evening approached, Marisol stood by the church's side door, holding her blue scarf between her hands. It was the same one she'd left as a goodbye note just days ago, draped over Luis's backpack when she slipped away. Now she reached up and hung it carefully on a wooden peg beside the entrance, smoothing out the wrinkles with deliberate care. Not a goodbye anymore? Luis asked, watching her from a few steps, away, his backpack slung over one shoulder. No, she said, smoothing the soft fabric one last time. Now it's welcome home, for us and for everyone who needs a safe place to land. Through the door's window, fat snowflakes had begun to fall, dusting the world in clean white, covering the grime and grit of the city streets with a fresh blanket of possibility. Inside, the radiator hummed its steady song of shelter, and hope found its proper place, not in grand gestures or viral videos, but in quiet acts of dignity restored, in systems rebuilt with care, and in the understanding that healing begins when people who have been hurt are finally given the power to prevent that same hurt from touching others. The next 2 days moved like a hymn. Friday morning found the Hope Homes board gathered around a long wooden table in the church basement. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting warm squares on the polished surface where draft bylaws lay in neat stacks. Ruth, as chair, led the meeting with steady grace. To her right sat Marisol, a survivor leader notebook open before her. Veterans, faith leaders, and social workers filled the other seats, each chosen for their hands-on experience rather than titles. These bylaws put survivors first, Ruth explained, tapping the document. Background checks for all hosts, mandatory training, clear boundaries, and most importantly, survivor leadership at every level. They reviewed each section carefully. When they reached the part about city selection, Marisol spoke up. Boston, Philadelphia, and Portland for the pilots, she said. Each has strong veteran networks, faith communities ready to help, and public transit. That matters when you're starting over. The board voted unanimously to approve. By afternoon, the bylaws were published online, transparent and accessible. Meanwhile, across town, Darius strode through company headquarters, noting the calm focus that had replaced last week's tension. Employees wore blue ribbons on their lanyards. The stock had stabilized after its initial dip. Vendor transitions are actually ahead of schedule, he reported during a video call with Evan. And HR says kindness PTO requests are being processed smoothly. People want to help. Good, Evan replied simply. His temporary office was a spare room above the diner where his mother had worked. Keep the focus on operations. This was never about me. That evening, the first host training session filled the church hall. Retired teachers, empty nesters, B&B owners, all waiting to learn how to offer safe shelter with dignity. Ruth and Marisol led them through scenarios, emphasizing boundaries and trauma awareness. You're not saviors, Marisol told them quietly. Your neighbor's keeping a light on. Saturday dawned with a gentle buzz of anticipation. Blue Windows Night had spread organically through social media. No corporate sponsorship, no official organization, just people choosing to show solidarity. In the morning, 3 mayors held simultaneous press conferences pledging municipal support for Hope Homes. They announced partnerships with transit authorities, job training programs, and health clinics. The senator's office released the full text of the Domestic Worker Protection Act. Its simple name honored Evan's mother, the Marie Kincaid Safety and Dignity Act. As afternoon settled into evening, blue lights began appearing across the city. Electric candles in apartment windows, blue bulbs on porch lights. Seniors set traditional candles on stoops, protected by glass hurricanes. Veterans gathered at VFW halls, raising blue-tinted glasses in silent toast. Children taped paper hearts in windows, colored with blue crayons and markers. Some drew houses with open doors. Others wrote simple messages. You are safe here, and we care. In one of the city's largest soup kitchens, Evan worked anonymously in jeans and a baseball cap, ladling out chili. No cameras, no press, no statements. Just quiet service alongside other volunteers. More crackers? He asked each person, learning that dignity lives in small choices freely made. Downtown, Skyscrapers transformed their usual white lights to soft blue. The effect rippled across the skyline like a gentle wave. Office buildings, hotels, even the old clock tower joined in, their combined glow turning the low clouds into a protective blanket over the city. At the church hall, tables filled with people sharing Saturday supper. Ruth moved between groups, making sure newcomers felt welcome. Luis helped the tech veterans set up a secure Wi-Fi network, his confidence growing with each successful connection. Marisol watched it all from her spot near the kitchen, where steam from huge pots of chili fogged the windows blue. A year ago, she would have hidden from such a gathering. Now she felt the strength of community wrapping around her, like her grandmother's favorite shawl. Luis brought her a bowl of chili and sat beside her. "Try it," he said. "I helped with the spices." She took a bite and smiled. "Just enough heat. Like us," he said, bumping her shoulder gently. They ate together, watching the hall fill with more people. Veterans teaching kids to play chess, grandmothers sharing family recipes, lawyers and social workers quietly offering guidance in corner booths. No pressure, no spotlight, just neighbors being neighbors. Through the windows, blue lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Not a solution, but a promise. You are not alone. We see you. We stand with you. The light stays on. Marisol's soft laugh at one of Luis's jokes joined the warm hum of conversation filling the hall. Their bowls empty, they lingered at the table, savoring the simple pleasure of being safe, being together, being home. Outside, the city glowed blue against the night sky, while inside, hope took solid form in steaming bowls, gentle voices, and the steady light of community made real. On Sunday afternoon, snow finally arrived. Soft flakes drifted past Marisol's new studio window as she unpacked her small collection of belongings. The space wasn't large, but it was hers, really hers, with her name on the lease and a deadbolt she controlled. She arranged her clothes in the closet, smoothing each item with care. The blue scarf from her grandmother was draped temporarily over a chair, waiting to find its new place at the church door. On her small desk, she laid out fresh notebooks and a laptop provided by the trust. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ruth. "Office supplies delivered. Ready when you are, Director." Director. The title still felt new, like shoes that needed breaking in. But Marisol knew she was ready. She'd spent the morning drafting intake procedures, carefully considering each step from a survivor's perspective. The forms were simple, the language clear, and most importantly, everything preserved dignity. Across town, Luis settled into his new weekend workspace at the Veterans Tech Center. Military precision met casual comfort here, clean workbenches lined with computers, but also comfortable chairs and endless coffee. "Remember," his mentor said, showing him how to trace network vulnerabilities. "We're the good guys. We protect. We don't attack." Luis nodded, thinking of all the doors he'd once been forced to open. Now he would learn to keep them safely closed. At the church, Ruth sat in her favorite corner, quilting needle moving steadily through fabric. The new banner took shape under her careful hands. "You are worth protecting," in deep blue letters against a warm cream background. Around the words, she stitched small houses with lit windows. "Like beacons," she murmured, knotting another thread. In a quiet conference room downtown, Evan and Darius met to formalize boundaries for the next few months. Darius had spreadsheets. Evan had a simple handwritten list. "No public statements about company operations," Evan said. "No executive decisions. I'll serve on the Hope Homes Advisory Board strictly as a private citizen and donor." Darius nodded, checking items off. "The separation is clear. And honestly, Evan, employee morale is strong. They respect what you did." What we all did. Evan corrected gently. How's the kindness PTO rollout? Smooth. People are using it exactly as intended, driving neighbors to appointments, cooking meals for shelters. Simple kindness. No fanfare. As afternoon settled toward evening, Marisol walked to the Hope Home's office to finish setting up. The space was modest but welcoming. Soft lights, comfortable chairs, and Ruth's quilts on the walls. She arranged the hotline schedule, making sure every shift had both a survivor and a trained volunteer available. The door chimed, and Evan stepped in, carrying a box of office supplies. He wore jeans and a warm sweater, no trace of the CEO, just a neighbor helping out. Need a hand? He asked. Together, they organized the intake area, working in comfortable silence. Marisol appreciated how he waited for her directions, never assuming control. I have something for you, he said finally, pulling out a simple nameplate. Marisol Vega, Director. She ran her fingers over the letters. Thank you. For this and for... She gestured at the space around them. For making it real, but letting it be ours. When they finished, the office looked ready. Resource pamphlets arranged neatly, coffee station stocked, Ruth's quilts adding warmth to every corner. A place of both business and comfort. Walk you out? Evan asked as Marisol locked up. The snow's pretty. They walked slowly past storefronts and apartments. Many windows still glowed blue. Some people had decided to keep the lights up as a permanent signal of solidarity. Snow gathered on their shoulders as they talked about simple things. Luisa's internship, Ruth's latest quilt patterns, the way the community had come together. Near the church, they paused. The moment felt weighted with possibility, but neither rushed to define it. They had both learned the value of careful steps, of letting trust build naturally. Marisol initiated the hug, a choice made freely, without pressure or obligation. Evan's return embrace was gentle, respectful. They held the moment briefly, then stepped back, smiling. At the church door, Marisol's grandmother's blue scarf draped gracefully over the wooden welcome sign. Snow gathered in its folds as the evening service bell began to ring, clear and hopeful in the gathering dusk.